Climb every mountain, search high and low, follow every byway, every path you know. Climb every mountain, ford every stream, follow every rainbow, till you find your dream.
In the fall of 1961, the Barstow family of Wethersfield, Connecticut, had just completed a series of 5 summer camping trips which had taken them to every one of the 48 contiguous United States, including visits to many national parks like the Grand Canyon here. Robbins worked for the Connecticut Education Association, and Margaret was an active homemaker. Daughter Mary was 17 years old and entering her senior year at Wethersfield High School. Older son David was 14 and starting out as a high school freshman. Younger son Daniel was 10 and beginning 5th grade. The family's home base was this middle-class house and yard, which they called Fair Acre, in the suburban town of Wethersfield, just south of Connecticut's capital city of Hartford. Outside in the backyard, Mary enjoyed playing her recorder with foreign exchange student Siggy Newman from Austria. To an appreciative audience of neighborhood children and parents. At this time, John Fitzgerald Kennedy was in his first year as President of the United States, and inspired by his youthful vigor, America was experiencing a resurgence of interest in the arts, sports, science, and internationalism. One of the neighborhood families, the Rates, later adopted a boy from Korea. The favorite indoor sport of Father Robbins was playing ping pong in their basement recreation room with son David. Daniel's elected musical instrument at that time was the French horn, nearly as big as he was. He practiced playing in his room at home, and he played for 1 year in the school orchestra. Both boys showed an early interest in science and math. Daniel impressed his teacher, Robert Burstein, with a blue ribbon science fair computer exhibit. This was an exciting time because astronaut John Glenn had just become the first American to orbit around the Earth in a space capsule. David and his math teacher, Frank Metcalf, knew that future computers would help achieve President Kennedy's announced goal of sending men to the moon and back by the end of the decade. Mary greatly enjoyed her social involvement with school friends. Here, celebrating after the high school spring musical production of Calamity Jane, Mary sang and danced in the chorus, and her music activities throughout high school earned her a school letter W. When it came time for the senior ball, Dad Barstow was worried about Cinderella, Mary's, short patchwork dress. But fantasy godmother Meg came to the rescue, and after carefully assessing the situation, she came up with a magic wand, which in true fairy tale style transformed in a flash Mary's old outfit into a gorgeous new Southern Belle evening gown. This was in the spring of 1962, and the big social event of the year for graduating seniors was the senior ball. Mary was part of a group of 8 young couples who began their evening with a progressive dinner. Different courses were served at different homes, and Mary had agreed to host the crowd of 16 students for dessert at the Barstow residence. Her date was Phil Smith. The couples began arriving at 8 p.m., and the girls were pleased to show off their beautiful gowns, all different, while the boys with whom they were paired uniformly wore white or light blue tuxedo jackets and black bow ties. According to diary accounts written at the time, Mary and the others in this group stayed out that night until 5:30 a.m. The ball at the high school lasted until midnight, and then was continued at the Wethersfield Country Club from midnight to 4 a.m., after which they had breakfast out before returning to their respective homes. Earlier that year, most of them, including Mary, had secured their driver's licenses as a critical part of the teenage rite of passage to adulthood. The date of Mary's graduation from Wethersfield High School was Thursday, June 21st, outdoors on the football field. The lineup of girls in white and boys in black made quite a procession to the presentation area, where each student individually received his or her diploma from the superintendent of schools. Mary had been elected to the National Honor Society in her junior year and was in the top 10% of her class. She was also awarded the prestigious Probus Club Book Award. After the ceremony, Mother Meg and other family members each wanted to congratulate Mary, Brother David, Brother Daniel, Meg's recently widowed mother, Grandma Vanderbeek, Grandma and Grandpa Barstow, and finally, movie taker Dad Robbins, with Meg, as always, documenting it all with her still camera. Mary was fortunate to have been able to secure admission to Earlham College in Richmond, Indiana. Founded in 1847 by the Society of Friends, or Quakers, it is a co-educational liberal arts college, and it was here that Mary would spend the next 4 years. Although both her mother and grandmother had gone to Mount Holyoke College, it was up to Mary to decide where she wanted to go, and her subsequent life and career certainly demonstrated that she had made a good choice. In the summer of 1962, before Mary went off to college, the whole family in their blue station wagon went on another cross-country camping trip to the Olympic National Park in the state of Washington on the Pacific coast. And then they went up to Seattle to spend a couple of days at the exciting World's Fair being held there that year. They enjoyed seeing all kinds of displays, exhibits, rides, and fountains, but the dramatic symbol of the Seattle World's Fair was the towering Space Needle, with a revolving restaurant at the top where they all had a great lunch with an incomparable view. The following year was a big one for the scouting career of then 15-year-old David Barstow. He had spent years working his way up through the ranks, attending scout camp, participating in state and even national rallies and jamborees, and earning a huge number of merit badges. Two of his particular scouting friends were Ted May and Ed Mazzullen, also from Wethersfield. All this led up to the momentous occasion when David was awarded the rank of Eagle Scout, along with his two friends. On January 3, 1963, at a special awards ceremony at the Mitchell School in Wethersfield, the Boy Scouts of America recognized these three stalwart young men for their outstanding achievements and character. It was a proud moment indeed when the mothers of these three awardees pinned on their sons' chests the Eagle Scout badge. Then, as is also the custom at this ritual, the three sons affixed pins to each of their mothers' dresses, acknowledging the special support and help which these ladies had given the boys throughout all their years of striving to attain this goal. An Eagle Scout badge does not come easily. Each one of the high number of individual merit badges displayed on these sashes required a great deal of time, effort, and developing skill. The boys were congratulated by their fathers and their scoutmasters. David's younger brother Daniel, then a Cub Scout moving on, also admired his brother's achievement. Among the major influences on growing teenagers at this time were motion pictures. The Barstow family always loved movies, and one of their all-time film favorites was the 1936 MGM production of Rudyard Kipling's Captain's Courageous, starring Freddie Bartholomew and Spencer Tracy. It is a stirring story of Gloucester fishermen on a classic sailing schooner who rescue a spoiled young rich boy who had fallen off an ocean liner in the North Atlantic. The boy is taught the lessons of manhood by cod-fishing Spencer Tracy, who later is killed in an accident at sea. In the film, he is mourned at a memorial service on the dock at Gloucester, where stands a marvelous statue in lasting tribute to they that go down to the sea in ships. With an oiled-skinned skipper standing resolutely at the wheel in the face of a threatening storm. In the summer of 1963, the Barstow family visited this very spot to admire this moving symbol of the courageous sea captains immortalized in Kipling's story, who for so many years had given their all to provide ocean sustenance for the hungry, and to view the inlet harbor where part of the movie was filmed. In December of 1963, 12-year-old Daniel became ill from an inherited blood condition of familial hemolytic jaundice and had to go to the Hartford Hospital to have a splenectomy, the removal of his spleen. His father and his older sister Mary had earlier likewise had to have their spleens removed and had fully recovered. It was a major operation, but a successful one, and Dan's long-term health was not affected. In true Barstow style, he had used his time in the hospital to make a scrapbook of my spleen experience. The family was glad and thankful to drive Dan home to full recovery. Early in the year 1964, the family took some time off to drive out and visit Mary on the campus of Earlham College in Richmond, Indiana. One of Mary's good friends, Marty Murdoch, had a motorcycle, and while others were discussing school and national affairs, David and Dan greatly enjoyed rides around town on Marty's bike. During Mary's second year at Earlham, momentous events had taken place in the United States. In August 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. had proclaimed his great dream of racial equality for all Americans. In November 1963, President Kennedy had been tragically assassinated in Dallas, Texas. These events made education for everyone all the more challenging. They also underscored the importance of religious faith. The hometown church which the Barstow family belonged to was the historic First Church of Christ, Congregational, in the center of old Wethersfield. The church had originally been founded at the town's beginning in 1635, and some of Dad Barstow's, Wolcott and Robbins' ancestors had been members from colonial days. At Easter time, Mary's friend Marty from Earlham came east for a weekend visit which included attending a Sunday morning worship service and meeting family friends active in the church, such as Ed and Mary Kenyon, who were leaders in Christian social causes like the peace movement and interracial bridge building. Throughout the children's youth, the minister at First Church was the Reverend Keith M. Jones, who served here for a total of 34 years. Mary was pleased to introduce to him her friend Marty, as they recalled Mary's many years of singing in the choir, and her 1 year having been Mary, the Mother of Jesus, in the church's annual Christmas pageant. In addition to attending Sunday school, all three of the Barstow children had been involved in various church activities. David had developed a special church project as part of his Eagle Scout program. Dad Barstow wanted to share with Marty the historic nature of the church building by pointing out the cornerstone, which had been laid way back on May 6, 1761, 15 years before the start of the American Revolution. This meant that this meeting house had been in use for well over 200 years, and the family was very conscious of this long tradition and heritage. The beautiful white steeple always was a welcoming homecoming landmark. In the spring of 1964, the Connecticut Education Association, the statewide teachers' organization where Robbins was employed, moved into this new headquarters building in Hartford. Robbins served on the staff here for a career total of 34 years. The 4th of July that year was a big day for Daniel and a lot of his young friends. Dan had been born on the 4th of July, and now at the age of 13 he had officially become a teenager. Down on Old Main Street in front of the church, a post rider in colonial costume on a magnificent brown horse had ridden into town for a celebratory historical reenactment. He carried with him for distribution to townspeople and kids authentic copies of the original Declaration of Independence signed in 1976 in Philadelphia to proclaim a free and independent United States of America. 1964 was also the year of another World's Fair, this time in New York City. It was close enough for the Barstow family to visit it several times and observe the giant hollow globe made of metal beams, which was its symbol. They were particularly interested now in searching out and visiting the exhibits of two northern European countries, Denmark and Norway. Because, as part of her Earlham College education, Mary was going to spend a semester of foreign studies in Scandinavia. This was the first time that any of the Barstow children had had an opportunity to go abroad. After driving Mary to the international airport in New York, everyone wanted to help carry the luggage she had packed for living 6 months overseas in 2 foreign countries. She was going to fly across the Atlantic on a large Air France jet plane and would not return for half a year. Living with other international students in Oslo, Norway, and then with a Danish family in Copenhagen was to be a very meaningful experience for Mary, as family members knew it would be, watching her plane depart into the dark night skies. Meanwhile, back on the home front, in his second-floor room at Fair Acre, David had set up a place to display his latest science fair project, a large-scale electronic thinking machine that played games with visitors and could not be beaten in tic-tac-toe. In the fall of 1964, a new member was added to the Barstow family, good-looking, energetic, smart, and very friendly. He was a young Cocker Spaniel, whom they named Matthew Truelove of Fairacre, or Matty for short. He loved greeting people with great enthusiasm, and he enjoyed running on a traveling wire leash in the big backyard. Inside the house, Matty enjoyed everybody's company, and he became a real pal to them all. Mary had sent each human member of the family a hand-knitted Norwegian sweater, and they all wanted to wear theirs to welcome her when she returned from Norway in December after her 6 months of study abroad. When she arrived at the front door, bringing a small straw reindeer as a Scandinavian souvenir for the mantelpiece, and after greeting Matty for the first time, she showed off the long, heavy winter cape she had bought in Europe, and which was greatly admired. Up in her second-floor room, she was glad to rest and relax over the holidays. Each of the Barstow children had always had a separate room of their own, and Mary's was kept open for her, even when she was away at college. A highlight of the Christmas season was a Danish dinner which Mary prepared for the family, including a delicious loaf of homemade bread, which each member around the table relished tasting. Mary sat between her 2 grandmothers, now both widowed, but both eager to hear about her experiences. Enjoying the repast were David, now 17, Meg's mother, Catherine Vanderbeek, Mary, now 20, Robin's mother, Dorothy Barstow, Daniel, now 13, Meg, and Robbins. One of the most memorable and meaningful experiences of David's senior year at Wethersfield High School was his playing one of the lead roles in the school's outstanding student production of the controversial Broadway play Inherit the Wind, a powerful courtroom drama written by Jerome Lawrence and Robert Lee. The play had been made into a dramatic movie in 1960, and in preparation for his role, David was able with Daniel to watch the movie on the living room television set. The film starred Spencer Tracy, Frederick March, and Gene Kelly, and the setting was the Hillsborough Courthouse.
Give me that old-time religion.
In the film, Frederick March is Matthew Brady, a famous statesman and popular orator who has come to Hillsborough to uphold a state law prohibiting the teaching of evolution in public schools. Spencer Tracy is Henry Drummond, the opposing lawyer who has come to defend a young school teacher arrested for breaking the law and teaching his students about Charles Darwin's scientific theories which contradicted the literal biblical account of creation. Many of the aroused townspeople crowded into the courthouse to witness their dramatic confrontation.
Here's the counsel.
Now, there, I'd like to get this part clear first. This is the book. This is the book that you're an authority on, isn't it?
That is correct.
You believe that every word written in this book should be taken literally?
Everything in the Bible should be accepted exactly as it is given there. Is it possible that something is holy to the celebrated agnostic?
Yes. The individual human mind. In a child's power to master the multiplication table, there is more sanctity than in all your shouted amens and holy holies and hosannas. An idea is a greater monument than a cathedral. And the advance of man's knowledge is a greater miracle than all the sticks turned to snakes or the parting of the waters. So you, Matthew Harrison Brady, through oratory or legislature or whatever, you pass on God's orders to the rest of the world. Well, meet the prophet from Nebraska.
I hereby declare this court is adjourned. Sine die.
My friend, my dear friend, your attention, please. Please. Fellow citizens and friends of the unseen audience, from the Hallowed Hills of
On the Hillsborough Courthouse set at Wethersfield High School, David Barstow played the Frederick March role of Matthew Harrison Brady, the tall, distinguished lawyer who supported the anti-evolution teaching law and who admonished his opponents to read your Bible. David's classmate, Jerry Supposich, played the Spencer Tracy part of Henry Drummond, the colorful opposing lawyer who attacked the law as a violation of freedom of thought. Rehearsal shots were filmed in color, but these scenes from the actual performance at the high school were only able to be filmed in silent black and white from a distance. At the start of the play, Brady, played by David, is welcomed by townspeople as he and his wife arrive on the scene. Brady was known for his long-time fundamentalist religious beliefs, and he is congratulated for coming to this small town to help stop the teaching of evolution, because he believed that the Bible must be accepted literally as written. Drummond, on the other hand, is a celebrated free thinker and defends the teaching of Darwin's theory of evolution. He vigorously seeks to discredit Brady's biblical literalism during the long dramatic trial scene where he cross-examines Brady. David later recalled that at the time of the play, he had hoped to get the Henry Drummond role because he admired that character's liberal thinking and social activism. But David was too tall. Acting in this play was significant for David because it reflected what actually was an important part of the family's life in the 1960s, namely frequent discussion of public issues and active involvement in the social movements of the day. This fictional Inherit the Wind play was actually patterned after the real-life 1925 Scopes trial in Dayton, Tennessee, where a young teacher named John Scopes was put on trial for violating the state's new law against teaching evolution. Scopes was prosecuted by three-time presidential candidate and political progressive William Jennings Bryan and defended by noted defense attorney Clarence Darrow. In that actual 1925 court case, the teacher was found guilty and fined, and he left teaching. Eventually, the law he was convicted under was repealed. But even though in the play the teacher likewise is found guilty for teaching about evolution, the message of the play came through loud and clear that this was wrong and undermined the fundamental human value of freedom to think. At the end of the play, Brady tries to deliver a closing statement explaining his stands, but the judge has adjourned the court. Brady desperately tries to read the paper he has prepared, mounting on chairs to try to get the attention of the spectators. But since the verdict has already been announced, there is not much interest in hearing another speech. Brady's effort proves to be his last stand, because at the play's conclusion he suffers a stroke and has to be carried off the stage, followed by the final dramatic announcement that Brady is dead. At the curtain call, David and his fellow protagonist, Jerry Supposich, received plaudits for their outstanding performances, as well as congratulations from the play's director, teacher Larry Wida. Throughout high school, David had been an active member of the National Thespian Society. Backstage, with his hair still white from the makeup, David also received warm congratulations from members of his family. David's younger brother, Dan, also enjoyed school play acting during his teenage years. He performed in a number of original productions like this one while still a student at the Silas Dean Middle School. At the end of his 8th grade year, he was voted Best Actor at the school, and like both his sister and brother before him, he later became a member of the National Thespian Society and performed in high school productions like The Music Man. June 24th, 1965, was the date of David's graduation from Wethersfield High School. Again, the ceremonies were held on the football field behind the school, with chairs set up and diplomas laid out for the 361 graduates across the field from the bleachers, where David's family members obligingly sat along the outside rail in view of the camera. Grandmother Barstow, Mary, Daniel, Grandmother Vanderbeek, and Mother Meg. The traditional procession of girls in white and boys in blue was as impressive as ever. David had established an outstanding academic record at high school. At the ceremonies, he delivered the salutatorian address. The topic he chose was Science and Man. In his senior year, he was president of the National Honor Society, and the diploma he received from Board of Education chairwoman and family friend Mrs. Ruth Truex was certainly well-earned and worth celebrating. As customary with the Barstow family, on the front lawn at home, after the ceremonies, everyone lined up to give David, while still in his cap and gown, their personal congratulations in descending order of age. Grandma Vanderbeek, Grandma Barstow, Dad Robbins, Mother Meg, Sister Mary, and Brother Dan. Not to be left out was Matthew, the family's Cocker Spaniel, eager to express his greetings too, even if he declined the honor of wearing the cap. As a matter of fact, Matthew had developed quite a repertoire of unusual tricks and had proved himself to be an excellent learner. Besides leaping through a hoop, He had been taught how to use his paw to open the door of a wooden toy contraption that the two boys had set up to deliver bits of dog biscuit through a cardboard tube. Matthew always waited until the food was on its way, and then he would tap the lever with his paw to get his reward. But Matthew's proudest achievement was learning to read. Two signs had been made, one reading "eat" and the other reading "don't eat." When David placed the signs down in front of him, he held dog biscuits in each hand. When Matt was released, he immediately went to the "eat" sign and ate the biscuits in that hand. But obeying the "don't eat" sign below the other hand, he refused to eat those biscuits. Only when David transferred the biscuits to the hand above the "eat" sign did Matthew take them. Smart dog. Robbins had a lot of cousins on his father's side, all of whom had married and had had numerous children of their own. Every few years they would all gather for a big family reunion, and this summer the setting was a large dairy farm in the northeast corner of Connecticut in the town of Woodstock. The biggest challenge of the day was getting everybody, all the aunts, uncles, cousins, and second cousins, to stand or sit still together in front of the barn for the mandatory photo taking. After this was accomplished, the kids were free to run off and explore various aspects of rural farm life for themselves. Dan had the special opportunity to ride bareback on the tawny pony owned by Karen, one of the farmer's daughters. The pony, named Goldie, would follow Karen's twists and turns without the use of reins. The owner of the farm was husky Robert Larson, who helped his wife Mary slice the picnic watermelon and then took a group to view his herd of Holstein dairy cows. He was proud of the milk they produced, and all the relatives were proud to have such a successful farmer in the family. Later in the summer, Mary, spending her college vacation as a camp counselor in New Hampshire, invited Dan, along with her mother and dad, to join her for a day-long climb to the top of New Hampshire's Mount Monadnock. David, who had gained admittance to Carleton College in Northfield, Minnesota, was back in Connecticut working to earn money toward college expenses. The mountain journey turned out to be a symbolic lesson in adolescent independence. Robbins and Meg found themselves exhausted when they reached the halfway point, and though they were reluctant to let their offspring go off on their own, the elders turned back down the mountain while Mary and Dan went on and reached the summit by themselves. Before school started in the fall of 1965, the whole Barstow family got together in the Fairacre front yard, all wearing the Norwegian sweaters Mary had gotten them, to take stock of where each one of them was in his or her life journey. Robbins, at 45, was in the middle of his 34-year career working for the teachers and students of Connecticut through the State Education Association. Meg, at 44, was just starting a career outside the home as a Head Start teacher in Hartford, and later as a college teacher of early childhood education. Mary, nearly 21, was starting her senior year at Earlham College and preparing also to become a teacher. David, 18, was heading to Carleton College in Minnesota, where he would major in computer science. Daniel, 14, was entering his freshman year at Wethersfield High School, now being the only one of the three children remaining at home. He did have Matthew, however, to keep him company. The family had been blessed with a good life in suburban Wethersfield, even though the 1960s were tumultuous years for the United States and the world, with civil rights struggles in the South and an escalating war in Vietnam. The next Barstow family milestone was Mary's graduation from college, which took place on the Earlham campus in June 1966. As a matter of fact, Mary had the unusual distinction of being a fifth-generation woman college graduate. Her mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, and great-great-grandmother on her mother's side had all graduated from college. Her great-great-grandmother, Catherine Jennings Parsons, had been one of the first women college graduates in America, receiving a Bachelor of Arts degree from Oberlin College in Ohio in 1844, just after Oberlin had become the first college in the United States to award college degrees to women. By the time fall rolled around that year, all 5 family members had developed their own individual means of traveling independently. With 2 jobs now, both Meg and Robbins needed to have a separate car. Daniel had trained Matthew to pull him along the side of the road while he rode on his skateboard. Mary had bought herself a little Volkswagen Bug to drive her to her beginning teaching job in Hartford. And David, out at Carleton, had learned how to ride a unicycle, which turned out to be a unique but effective way to travel around the campus or the neighborhood when home on vacation. Education was a lifelong value for all of the Wethersfield Barstows, and at the University of Connecticut commencement at Storrs in June 1967, another milestone was celebrated by Robin's mother, Dorothy, his patient wife of 25 years, Meg, their son, Dan, their daughter, Mary, and their other son, David. Dave had brought east with him for her first visit a fellow Carleton student named Linda Francis, whom the family would see much more of later. The occasion was Robbins being awarded a hard-earned Doctor of Philosophy degree in Educational Administration. He had spent 8 years of part-time graduate study and seemingly endless hours of research and writing to finally end up with a nearly 300-page dissertation, using punch cards to tabulate the results of his several statewide surveys. Computers were in their infancy then, and every time he had to revise what he had written, it was necessary to have the entire thesis retyped. He prepared 6 different drafts before the 7th revision was finally accepted by the university faculty, and he became entitled to be referred to as Dr. Barstow, and to proudly wear the lavender blue and white Ph.D. hood. A good deal of Robbins' work with the Connecticut Education Association involved seeking to improve working relationships between local boards of education and their teacher employees. His dissertation was on the effectiveness of guidelines without legislation in teacher-school board negotiations. Impressive as this was to his family, Robbins, in receiving their congratulations, was himself impressed with how much each of the 3 children seemed suddenly to have matured. That summer seemed to be a good time to invest in a new red and black Rambler station wagon, and 25 not only marked the speed limit in front of their house, but also marked the number of years that Robbins and Meg had been married. So, with everyone's best wishes, Robbins brought Meg a bouquet of 25 red roses on September 18th, 1967, the date of their 25th anniversary. They were exceedingly grateful for the joys and satisfactions which, along with the problems and concerns, a quarter of a century of mutual caring and love had brought to them and their family. Meg's Head Start work with pre-kindergarten children in Hartford had resulted in many new cross-cultural friendships, and on occasion, members of some of the Hartford families visited the Barstow homestead in Wethersfield. They enjoyed playing in the yard with their hoops, with Dan and Meg being an appreciative audience, as well as picking flowers for their teacher and getting to know Maddie. In the summer of 1968, Dan had a great educational experience on the other side of the world as an American Field Service exchange student in Australia. On his return to Hartford's Bradley Airport, he was accompanied by Dave on vacation from Carleton College. Since the seasons are reversed in the Southern Hemisphere, Dan told everyone that the best summer of his life was the winter he spent in Australia. On his arrival home, he sported a straw hat or boater his host family had given him. On the front lawn back at Fairacre, It was Mattie who seemed most eager to greet Dan and Dave and welcome them home. This trip had been taken in between Dan's junior and senior years at Wethersfield High and before David's senior year at Carleton. Mary at this time had moved on to Boston. In addition to Matthew's exuberant antics, a crowd of neighborhood friends had turned out to see Dan back and hear about his experiences in that faraway country. It provided a great photo opportunity, particularly for those admiring the way Dan twirled his boater, Australian style. The following year, in June of 1969, David became the second Wethersfield Barstow to graduate from college out in Northfield, Minnesota, at Carleton. At this point in his life, he stood very tall, particularly in the eyes of his soon-to-be fiancée, Linda Francis. Linda was from Royersford, Pennsylvania, and still had another year at Carleton to complete her bachelor's degree. By this time, David had grown a distinguished-looking beard. And of course, Linda wanted to make sure that his graduation cap fitted properly. Their personal motto there at Carleton was, "Life's great." Dave liked to think of himself as a thinker, and he was pleased to have been elected to Phi Beta Kappa, and his degree was awarded magna cum laude. He had majored in computer science, then a relatively new but rapidly growing field of study, and he had done special research in the area of artificial intelligence. Of course, all members of the family had to be there for this occasion, including Mary with a new hairdo. They had driven all the way from Wethersfield, some 1,500 miles, in 3 days to attend the ceremony, give Dave the traditional filmed handshakes, and among other activities, meet and talk with Dave's chief faculty advisor, Professor Graham Kimball, head of the computer center at the college. Back in Wethersfield, just 11 days later, on the 24th of June, 1969, Grandma Vanderbeek, for the third time, joined the family to witness a high school graduation. Daniel was the third Barstow to be in the National Honor Society, and like his brother David, he was president of the society in his senior year. A very active student, Dan also was on the track team and in the National Thespian Society. He couldn't show everyone his actual diploma because it hadn't yet been put in the case he received. But he was very happy to share the occasion with special friends, including Arlene Stumpf, who had been his date for the senior ball. Also celebrating were his classmate Paul Sale and other members of the Sale family, as well as exchange student Jorge from Argentina. During the summer, Dan got a job working at the local McDonald's to earn money for college, having learned, like David, to ride a unicycle, impressing both family and customers. Daniel had chosen and gained admittance to the liberal coeducational Kalamazoo College in Michigan, and he became the third member of the family to leave Wethersfield for higher education as his teen years neared their end. Actually, 1969 was a momentous year in the whole history of life on Earth, because it was then that for the very first time human beings set foot on another celestial body beyond the Earth's atmosphere. The headline "Man Walks on Moon," shared with some teacher friends, marked July 20th, 1969, as day one, year one of a whole new era in the relationship of Earth's finite humans to God's infinite universe. These images of two American astronauts actually walking on the surface of the moon were filmed live from the TV screen in the Barstow living room, just 8 years after President Kennedy in 1961 had set the then seemingly impossible goal of sending men to the moon and back by the end of the decade. What a historic note of triumph to end on. Mary now had a new job in Boston. Daniel was starting college, and David, having bought himself his own little VW Bug, was setting out to drive all the way across the country to California, where he had enrolled in a computer science graduate program at Stanford University in Palo Alto. Wethersfield had indeed provided all three Barstow children with both roots and wings.
We hope you've enjoyed this Barstow travel adventure film. We'll be releasing more of Robin Barstow's home movies on this YouTube channel during 2021. Click here to subscribe and receive the latest updates. Meanwhile, enjoy these other films by a master of home movie storytelling in the pre-digital era.